Now, in this video lecture, I will talk about sampling and sampling designs. But first, let us get acquainted with common terms useful as we go through the process of our research. So, there are different concepts presented in the definition that will be given in a little while. So, let's start with the first term, population. So, population means the total of items about which our information is desired. It can be classified into two categories. Population can be finite and infinite. The population is said to be finite if it consists of a fixed number of elements so that it is possible to enumerate in its totality. Examples of finite populations are the populations of a city, the number of workers in a factory, and other areas with items that have definite datasets. On the other hand, an infinite population is that population in which it is theoretically impossible to observe all the elements. In an infinite population, the number of items is infinite. Example for this, obviously, is the number of stars in the sky. From practical consideration, we use the term infinite population for a population that cannot be enumerated in a reasonable period of time. Now let's move to sample. Sample is the part of the population that represents the characteristics of the population. While sampling, this is the process of selecting the sample for estimation of the population's characteristics. In other words, it is the process of obtaining information about an entire population by examining only a part of it. The next one is sampling unit. These are elementary units or group of such units which, besides being clearly defined and identifiable and observable, are convenient for purpose of sampling. So these are the sampling units. For instance, example, in a family budget inquiry, usually a family is considered as the sampling unit since it is found to be convenient for sampling and for ascertaining the required information. On the other hand, in a crop survey, a farm or a group of farms owned or operated by a household may be considered as a sampling unit. The next term is statistic. Statistic is the characteristic of the sample. For example, sample mean or the proportion. Next is parameter. Parameter is the characteristic of the population, while target population is the entire group about which information is desired and conclusion is made, while sampled population is the population which we actually sample and is the sampled population is also called survey population. Sample design, this is the sample or sampling process that refers to the plans and methods that we follow in selecting sample from the target population and the estimation technique formula for computing our sample statistics. So these statistics are the estimates used to infer the population parameters. So this figure here will help us or guide us in our sampling process. The very main purpose of sampling is to provide an estimate of the population parameter and to test our hypothesis. So it is very advantageous because it allows us to save time and money. Also, it enables us to collect comprehensive data, accurate measurement as it conducted by trained and experienced researchers. Also, sampling will give us information most especially for infinite population. In certain situations, sampling is the only way of data collection. For example, in testing the pathological status of blood or boiling status of rice, so it needs to be sampled because the population is infinite. Sampling also provides us valid estimation of data. So I hope that is very clear for us the purpose of sampling. Now let's move forward. This time, the stages of sampling process. So before we start or we choose our sampling design, we need to check first the stages of sampling process. We need to define our population first. So the population must be defined in terms of elements, sampling units, extent, and time, because there is very rarely enough time or money to gather information from everyone or everything in a population. So our goal becomes finding a representative sample of that chosen population. The second stage is specifying the sampling frame. So as a remedy, we seek sampling frame which has the property that we can identify a very or a single element that is included in our sample. The most straightforward type of frame is a list of elements of the population and with appropriate contact information. A sampling frame may be a telephone book, a city directory, an employee roster, a listing of all students attending a university, or a list of all possible phone numbers. Then after we have our sampling frame, we will go to our sampling unit. So sampling unit is a basic unit that contains our single element or a group of elements to be sampled. It is often dependent upon the sampling frame. So if a relatively complete and accurate listing of elements is available, one may well want to sample them directly. If no such register is available, we need to sample companies as the basic sampling unit. Now the next stage is selection of the sampling method or the sample design, and then followed by determination of our sample size. So the sample size calculations depends primarily on the type of our sampling design to be used. And then the next stage will be specifying our sampling plan. In this step, the specifications and decisions regarding the implementation of the research process are outlined. And then the last one will be the final step in our sampling process, which is the actual selection of the sample.